Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peter Likes Books. And today we are back for another reading of the Before Now and After Then by me and read by me. I think we only have like 5 chapters left or something. Let's see, we're on chapter 32 and there is the afterword, the epilogue, and then 38 chapters. Oh my God, we're so close to the end. All right, let's go in and start reading. Chapter 32. After school, I rushed outside, hoping to find Rusty waiting for his mom, but I saw her minivan driving away as soon as I got to the parking lot. I found my car and started to drive after them, but was stopped by Cher, who was standing in my way. "Are you going to hit a pregnant woman?" she said, getting into the car. I saw him get into his mom's van. "Take me home quick and then go over there and talk to him." I drove Cher home and she kissed my cheek before getting out. "It'll all work out the way it's supposed to." I had heard those kinds of things. I had heard those kinds of things all my life, but nothing ever turned out the way it was supposed to. At least not yet. I smiled so she would get out of my car, and then I took off towards Rusty's house, or toward Rusty's house. When I got there, I found him skating in the driveway. He didn't stop when I parked and got out. He just kept on skating. "Hey," I said, walking up to him. He didn't say anything back to me. "Hey," I said again, walking until I was so close that he couldn't skate anymore. He picked up his board and looked down at the ground. "Hey," he said, refusing to look at me. I reached out and tried to touch him, but he flinched and pulled back. "What's going on? I'm so confused. None of this makes any sense to me." He nodded. "I know, but I don't really know what to say or how to explain it. How about you try? I think I deserve that much." He started walking up to his house. "Can't you just accept that I'm sorry and leave it at that?" I grabbed his arm and turned him around. He was crying. "No," I shouted. "I can't accept that. It's not fair. You give me this perfect week followed by an even more perfect weekend and then you take it all away from me? Life's not fair, Danny, and life's not perfect. Get over it." "Hey, asshole, don't talk to me like that, like you're my dad. I think I know more than anyone that life isn't fair or perfect." He looked up and stared at me hard. "Do you think you have it harder than everyone else? Do you think that your pain is more real?" he asked. "I'm sorry you lost your brother, Danny, but it doesn't mean that you've cornered the market on pain." He started to walk inside. "I don't deserve that, and you know it. What did I do wrong? Just tell me so I can fix it." I was yelling and sobbing at the same time. "Please, Rusty, just tell me what I did wrong." He turned and walked back to me, wrapping his arms around me. "Hey, shh. You didn't do anything wrong. Then what happened? I don't understand." Rusty looked around. "Fine, let's talk, but not here. Let's go somewhere. Anywhere but here." We got in my car and drove to Starbucks. We didn't order drinks. We just sat in the parking lot, far away from the other cars, and looked at each other. "You didn't do anything wrong, Danny." We didn't order drinks. We got in my car and drove to Starbucks. We didn't order drinks. We just sat in the parking lot, far away from the other cars, and looked at each other. "You didn't do anything wrong, Danny." I shook my head. "Then please explain to me what is going on. I've texted and called you for 3 days, and you haven't returned any of my calls." I wiped my eyes and looked at him, searching his eyes. Is it over? Are we done?" He nodded, and tears started falling down his cheeks. "Yeah, it's over." "Why? I can change. I can be whoever you want me to be," I cried hysterically. "Why do you think I want you to change? You're perfect. I love exactly how you are. That's the problem." I was so confused. I just stared at him with my mouth open. He wasn't making any sense. "Maya was in the hospital all day Sunday and all day Monday," he said. "They ran tons of tests, but she's just not getting any better here." I still didn't get it. "She isn't getting better here," Rusty said. "Eventually we'll have to move and then I'll have to say goodbye to you, and I can't deal with that. I can't stand getting close to another person just to have to say goodbye." And then I got it. "Is that what happened with you and your ex-boyfriend Justin?" Rusty nodded. "But we're different. We can be different. We can make it work," I pleaded. He shook his head. "How, Danny? How can we make it work if I'm living in Boston or Texas or Arizona? I don't even know how long we'll be there. This is my life. This is what I have to deal with. I don't allow people to get close to people. I don't allow myself to get close to people anymore because I just end up having to say goodbye. That's why I hated Boston. I didn't have any friends there, and all I ever did was sit in my room and dream of having some kind of future. But this is my future. Next year we'll be done with high school and we'll be in college. We can go wherever we want." He shook his head. "Danny, you don't get it. This is my next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. Just because I graduate and go to college doesn't mean I get to move away and leave my family. My mom needs me." "But you don't even know if you'll end up moving. You might be here forever," I said. "Danny, we move at least twice a year. We always have ever since Maya was a baby. It isn't going to change now." I looked out at the window at the traffic going by on the interstate. It was strange how life just continued to move on even though your life felt stuck in time. "So it's over, and you're not even willing to give it a try?" "It has to be," he said softly. Well, I think that's crap. Seriously, you have issues with saying goodbye to people? Don't you think I have issues? How about my having huge abandonment issues? First my brother dies and my parents separate and now you break up with me? It's not fair. I'm sorry I said what I did about Sam, Rusty said. You're right, you didn't deserve that. But this isn't like Sam dying. You'll get over this. You'll get over me. I turned and looked at him and started crying again. I don't want to get over you. I don't want to not know you anymore. Rusty didn't say anything. He just sat back in the seat and looked out at the road. I watched him. He was shaking a little bit, like when we had been on the Ferris wheel. He's afraid of uncertainty, I thought to myself. I started crying again. It was over. We both knew it. There was nothing I could do to change his mind. So what now, I asked. What do you mean? What now? Do I get to talk to you at school? Can we text and call each other, or are we just done? Rusty turned slowly and looked at me. I think maybe it's best if we just didn't talk anymore. I think it would be easier for both of us. I shook my head. Why do you get to make all the rules? You don't even like rules. He turned to me and smiled. You're right, I don't. I didn't want to take him back home. I knew when I did it would be over for good. I just wanted to sit in the car next to him and never leave. Do you remember when you asked me if I ever wanted to just keep driving forever? Yeah, Rusty said. If you asked me to go right now, I would leave and never look back. Rusty touched my cheek, wiping a tear away from under my eye. You know you'll always be the one, right? How can you say that and expect me to be okay with this? Because it's easier this way, Rusty said. Easier for you, I hissed. Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I wouldn't rather wait until we have to move and then do this? But I've done this before and it isn't easier, it's harder. Couldn't you have just picked a fight with me so I could hate you and never want to talk to you again? I tried that, Rusty said, but you just kept driving by my house at all hours of the night. I knew eventually I would have to talk to you. I smiled. He had known. I don't want to take you home because then it's over, I said, crying gently. I don't want to go home either, but we have to eventually. I grabbed his hand and he didn't flinch or pull away from me. Can we just stay here for a while? He nodded. I'd like that. He started crying before he got it all out. It's terrible to grow up and have to deal with grown-up stuff like death and separation, sickness and loss. And maybe we weren't ready to deal with those things yet, even though they were being forced upon us. Maybe that was growing up. We just sat there for the longest time, watching the sun set and holding each other's hands. Finally, the last glimmer of sun left the sky and we sat in the dark. I reached over and this time I took his face in my hands and kissed him. And he kissed me back. I'll miss you, Rusty Gonzalez. I'll miss you too, Danny Goldstein, he cried. And then it was over. Chapter 33. When your own book makes you cry. That's so stupid. I guess not stupid, but... Chapter 33. We had been together for approximately 12,960 minutes, but it had seemed longer. Maybe the heart doesn't know time, and some minutes feel longer than others. I missed him, but I hadn't called him or texted him, and he hadn't called or texted me either. Instead, I just sat in my room. I refused to go to school for the rest of the week, and I refused to go see Neil for my appointment. Mom threatened to take away my car, but I didn't care. I didn't have anywhere to go anyway. I sat in my room all weekend, not talking to anyone. From time to time, Alex or Mom would check on me, but I just told them to go away. I think they were worried I was going to hurt myself, but that was the farthest thing from my mind. I already hurt enough. I just wanted to feel better. Cher stopped by a few times, but I told Mom I didn't want to see her. She texted me later telling me she understood I needed space, but that she couldn't stay in school if it meant having to eat by herself. I laughed, but didn't have the energy to text her back. By Sunday, I think Mom was pretty worried because she had Dad come over and I could hear them talking in the kitchen. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could hear Mom raising her voice. An hour went by and they were still talking. She was accusing Dad of it being his fault. This went back and forth for a while until I finally pulled myself out of bed and walked down into the kitchen to break it up. What are you guys fighting about? I asked. They just stood there and looked at me like two kids caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. We're not fighting, honey, Mom said. We're just worried about you. Cut the honey crap, Mom. I could hear you yelling at Dad for the last hour. What is it you think is his fault? It's nothing, Dad said. But Mom shot him a glance and started crying. Nothing, she asked. Is that what you think of our son? That's not what I meant, Dad said. You know that's not what I meant. I was confused. If you guys are talking about me, I'm really confused. Is this about me not going to school? If it will get you guys to shut up, I promise I'll go back to school tomorrow. I'll even go and see Neil if that will just stop you guys from fighting. And then they both started crying. Dad's legs folded to his knees and he fell down. Mom stood over him, patting his back. I'm sorry, Rick. I should never have said it was your fault. You know that's not true. I don't know, Dad said, shaking his head. Maybe if we hadn't bought them the Jeep like you had wanted, he'd still be alive. They were talking about Sam. Are you guys talking about Sam, I asked. Both Mom and Dad looked up at me sobbing. Seriously, are you fighting because you guys think you were to blame for Sam's death? Do you really think you're that fucking important? I could feel all the rage from the past few days building up inside of me. I am so fucking tired of you guys melting down in a moment because Sam's dead. Guess what? Shit happens and there's nothing we can do about it. Now I was crying. I miss him like crazy. I think about him every day. I can't even look in the fucking mirror without thinking about him because when I do, I see him looking back. But he's gone and I can't do anything about that. I stopped for a second and caught my breath. Now, can we either continue to be a family who thinks we've cornered the market on pain, or can we move through this crap together? But one thing I know, now we can either continue to be a family who thinks we've cornered the market on pain, or we can move through this crap together. But one thing I know for sure, Sam would never have wanted this. He was funny and bright and always making people laugh. He would have been disgusted if he thought he was the cause of all this bullshit. I grabbed my keys off the counter. I'm done being sad about Sam. He wouldn't have wanted that. He would have wanted me to live and be happy. Mom and Dad stood up and started to walk towards me. And another thing, I'm done with all this emotional, huggy bullshit too. I'm going for a drive. I turned around and walked out barefoot. I drove for a long time and thought about all the things that had happened over the past 2 weeks. I drove to our old house and just sat out front, looking at the darkness inside. I wish Sam would open the door and wave at me and everything would be okay, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. And then I drove by Rusty's house. I didn't stop, I just drove by slowly, looking inside, wishing he would walk out and change his mind. But I knew that wasn't going to happen either. And then I just drove past the high school and past our side of town. I took country roads until I had no idea where I was anymore. I drove past small towns that only had one stoplight. I liked looking in the windows of the farmhouses, wondering what the families inside were eating for dinner. I drove even further out into the country until the only light around was from the full moon overhead and the headlights on my car. I came to a two-way stop. Two signs pointed in different directions, each with the name of a city that didn't sound familiar. I turned off the car lights and just sat for a few minutes before turning off the engine. I got out of the car and walked to the middle of the road. I looked in both directions. I had no idea where I was or how to get home. Finally, I just sat down on the gravel road and looked up at the full moon hanging directly in front of me. I had never been so absolutely alone in my entire life. I sat there for a long time, taking the smells of the country and listening to the night song of the cicada. I remember Dad telling me when I was a kid that when the cicada sang their song, it was their way of saying goodbye to summer. Fall was right around the corner. So much had happened in such a short amount of time. I wasn't the same person I had been 6 months before, or even a week before. Life had changed me somehow, and it had happened without me even noticing it. Sam had said goodbye, and so had Rusty. They were both gone, and they weren't coming back. That was my reality. Goodbyes were a part of life. And as I sat there listening to the cicada bid farewell to another summer, I said goodbye too. So, should I read one more chapter? The next chapter is really long though, I think. Hold on a second. The next chapter is really intense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll read you the next chapter, okay? But it's a cliffhanger, so, okay. Chapter 34. I didn't go to school the next day, even though I promised I would. I was exhausted from the drive the night before, and all I wanted to do was sleep. Somehow I felt different. I was still sad, but I also had some renewed hope, like I had shed something on my drive out into the night country. Maybe I had grown up somehow by forcing myself to look at all those things that hurt the most. I was ready for the hurt to go away. I didn't want to hurt anymore, but I didn't know how to make it stop. It was after 1 by the time I went downstairs. I expected to find poppy seed muffins and jam, but instead, I found a note from Mom. You have an appointment with Neil at 4. Do not miss it. I laughed to myself as I read the note, thinking how hard it had been for Mom to write this letter with such determination and harshness. I picked up the pen next to the note and responded, "Yes, sir," and smiled, thinking of her reading the note later. I got Boo and took him outside. He ran around the yard. He's looking at me right now. He ran around the yard by himself, and I felt bad for not having enough energy to play with him. I realized I hadn't played with him much since I had gotten him, and I swore to myself that I would start playing with him and letting him sleep in bed with me. It felt like I was always planning things I would do in the future instead of living in the moment like Rusty had suggested. Heavy clouds hung over the lake. I watched the pool sweep, make its way across the lining of the perfectly clear pool, wondering what dirt it was possibly cleaning as it trailed the bottom. The dark light under the diving board looked foreboding with the coming storm, and I was tempted to turn it on, just so it wouldn't look so much like the lingering shark eye. I laughed to myself, thinking about how, since as a child, I had been afraid of the dark, light, and the pool sweep, two seemingly normal things which I had turned into horrifying objects of destruction in my mind. I wondered why people always made non-threatening things seem so dangerous. Boo was becoming agitated from the oncoming storm, and his whimpering let me know it was time to go inside. I showered and tried to make myself look presentable for my appointment with Neil. I made the decision to bring along the journal Rusty had given me, thinking possibly it would be the tool I needed to finally open up to Neil. Maybe Neil could even make sense of everything for me since I couldn't. It was worth a try. I was lucky that the rain didn't start while the top was down in my car as it sat parked in the driveway. There was just enough time to get to the top, to get the top in place before the rain began. I really needed coffee to make it through the dreary afternoon, so I pulled through Starbucks and settled on a plain venti coffee, just plain like myself. Hidden menu frappuccinos belonged in my past. I got to Neil's office half an hour early. I sat in the parking lot watching the rain pour down over the parked cars. Thunder cracked overhead and I could see lightning in the distance. The wind seemed to pick up speed quickly, and I could feel it rocking my car in the wake of the storm. As I looked around the parking lot, I thought I saw Mom's car and assumed she had planned some kind of emergency family session after my screaming episode the night before, but it seemed out of character for her. She and Dad had allowed me to dictate my own sessions with Neil in hopes that I would feel like I was getting the most out of them. I pushed the door open into the wind and was almost blown back into my car. At the last minute, I grabbed the journal. You know what's so funny? I just remember this while I was writing this. This was actually, I remember this day that I wrote this, because it was that kind of day outside. And I can remember opening my door, and I had to go to the BMV for some reason. I don't know why, but the building where I had like imagined Neil's office was in this BMV. It was like this 10-story building. And like I opened the door and the door like flew right back into me. Anyway, I pushed the door open into the wind and was almost blown back into my car. At the last minute, I grabbed the journal, slammed the door shut, and ran up to the building, getting drenched within seconds. Once inside the office building, I walked to the second floor and opened the door to Neil's waiting area. He was silent inside and the door wasn't open, so I assumed he was still with another client. I could hear him talking with someone in his private office where he made calls and did paperwork, and I almost bolted, imagining him in there with Mom and Dad, plotting a scheme of attack. When the door opened, Neil walked out alone. I tried to look in the office, but it appeared empty. "Are you ready, Danny?" I nodded and followed him into the room where we met for our sessions. I sat down on the couch and looked around the room. Nothing had changed. Everything was exactly in the same place it had been since the last time we had met, and something about that seemed comforting. The windows were behind me, so I couldn't see the storm, but I could hear it pounding its strength against the glass. "You haven't been in here for a while," Neil asked. "Your mom said you just forgot your appointments, but I got the impression maybe you just didn't want to come in here anymore. Is that true?" I shrugged. Neil sighed. "Well, why won't you let me help you?" I lifted my head and looked at Neil, really looked at him. Why wouldn't I let him help me? For so long I had made so many excuses why he couldn't help me that I hadn't looked at the one obvious thing staring me straight in the face. Maybe he could help me. I just had to give him the chance. "I'm scared," I said. Neil relaxed. "Scared of what?" "I don't know. Myself, I guess." "What about yourself are you afraid of?" I shrugged again. I don't know how to explain it. It's just that I don't know what I'm doing here. "You mean in my office?" I shook my head. "No, here." I motioned all around me. "I don't know what my purpose is. I don't feel like I have anything to live for anymore." Neil put his notepad and pen on the table in front of him and leaned over. "What are you saying to me, Danny?" "I'm not suicidal. I don't even think about killing myself." I was confusing things even more now. "I just feel lost." Silence surrounded us. "Why don't you start at the beginning?" Neil said. "Tell me everything." And I don't know why, but I did. I told him everything. I started way back when I was in the first grade and how I felt different than everyone else. I told him about growing up in Sam's shadow. I talked about Sam's death and my parents' separation. I talked about Cher and school, and I talked about Rusty. I told him the beginning, the middle, and the end, and I told him about the journal. I told him all of it, the good, the bad, and the bad, because even though most of it made me hurt inside, there was so much good about all of it too. And I cried, not just tears of pain, but tears of relief that I could finally share my story. And that's when I realized it. This was my story, all of it. "Did you bring the journal in for me to see?" he asked. I picked up the journal from the floor and hesitantly handed it to him. Neil opened it up and read the words delicately written on the first few pages. "I think the journal is a beautiful gift," Neil said. "Maybe you can write down all of your memories of you and Rusty and Sam and everything that's happened to you before now." "But the journal was supposed to just be for my memories with Rusty." "Things change," Neil said, smiling at me. "I know it's hard to hear that, but it's true. I don't think I like change." He laughed and handed the journal back to me. "Not many of us do, but change is good. Sometimes things happen the way they're supposed to happen." "But what do I do now?" "You go on living. That's the best thing you can do. And maybe someday, things will be exactly the way that you want them to be." I shook my head slowly. "You don't understand." Neil sat up. I think I understand better than you think. And that's when I saw what he was holding in his hand. A red heart cut out of construction paper, exactly like the ones Rusty had used for my scavenger hunt to find Boo. Neil held it up and I saw written on it, "You're my something to live for." I had this confused look on my face. Neil turned around and opened the door. "I think you should come in here now," he said. I saw the door of his private office open as Uncle Alex stepped out of the room and waved at me. "Would you mind if I came in and sat with you guys for a moment?" he asked. For a minute, he asked. I shook my head. I don't even know why I'm getting emotional reading this part, my God. I shook my head, still confused. Alex sat in the chair next to Neil's and grabbed his hand. They looked at each other and smiled. "Neil is the boy in my book," Alex said. "Neil?" I had always imagined that Neil had a wife and kids at home, waiting for him to tell the stories about his crazy clients over dinner. "I don't understand." "I didn't come home to write a book," Alex said. "I came home for Neil. It was time." I could see his eyes full of tears. "Don't give up on Rusty. You never know when he might come back to you. Maybe something will happen and he'll realize you're his something to live for." It took Sam dying for me to realize how short life really is, and by then I had already lost so much time. I decided I had to at least try. I couldn't wonder what if for the rest of my life, he said, squeezing Neil's hand. "I don't think we're just passing through life without purpose," Neil said. "I think maybe our purpose is love, and we're too blind to see it. Maybe Rusty is your purpose." He looked at Alex. "He's right. Never give up on love. Don't give up on Rusty. Not yet." "But what do I do? How do I get him back?" Alex laughed. "That took me 20 years to figure out." "I don't want to wait 20 years. "Love doesn't know time," Alex said. "Things happen when they were supposed to happen. Rusty didn't break up with you because he doesn't love you. He broke up with you because he's afraid." He looked over at Neil. "I know all too well what that's like." "So I'm just supposed to sit around and wait for him to decide he wants to be with me again? What if that never happens?" "Danny, I would think you, more than anyone, would have figured out by now that there are some things in this world that just happen and we can't figure them out. We can't change the outcome. We just have to keep on living." He leaned back in his chair. "It's like with musicians. When they're happy, they rock out and roar at the crowd. When they're sad, they put their emotions into their songs, but they never give up on the music. Even when they're gone, the songs keep playing." Neil got up and walked into his private office. "Are you going to be okay?" Alex asked. "Yeah, it still hurts, but I think I'm going to be okay," I said, not really sure I believed it. We stood up and Alex hugged me. He didn't let go for a long time. "I love you, kiddo. You're one of the best people I know." Alex told me he would see me later at home, and then he and Neil said goodbye to me. I walked out to my car in the rain. Inside, I just sat there for a long time, unsure of what to think. I turned on the stereo and started playing the first mixtape Rusty had made for me. I wanted the music to live on forever. Oh my God, it's such an emotional read today. My audience right here. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thank you for listening, and I will be back tomorrow. I probably will finish it up tomorrow because, well, maybe not. Maybe not. You'll have to wait and see. Anyway, I love you guys, and I will see you then. Bye.